Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ning's Community Management Talks series. I hope you're all having a great week so far. I want to thank you for joining us today. My name is Allison Leahy, and I'm the Community Manager at Ning. And I'm joined here with Crystal Coleman on the Ning team and your presenter for the hour, Mark Siegel. Mark has been doing online community since before the web existed for big names like NASA, IBM, as well as several startups. He has experience with consumer oriented and B2B communities. Mark's passion is for helping companies get close to their customers, especially for product ideas. He has built several support communities and is very interested in human centered community. If you're not quite sure what all that means or how to bring this concept to life in your own community, you're in the right place. Mark will be reviewing the principles of human centered community management and sharing stories from his past experiences. There's a good chance you've joined us before, but for those who are new to Ning's community management talks, I'll just go over a few of our housekeeping notes. We will be live tweeting the event and encourage you to share any comments, quotables, and questions using the hashtag NingTalk, hashtag NINGTALK. If your question is over 140 characters, go ahead and submit it using the questions feature in GoToWebinar. You can submit as many questions as you like during the course of the presentation. And rather than saving all those questions for the end today, we will be engaging Mark throughout his presentation. So we'll also try to save some time at the end for any questions we miss, but if you have something that's topical or timely, go ahead and submit it to us right away and we'll interrupt Mark and put him on the spot for you. So thanks again for carving a little time out of your day to be with us. We're very lucky and grateful that Mark has agreed to join us today, and we're really excited about this topic, human-centered community. So without further ado, here's Mark Siegel.
Thanks so much, Allison, and also thanks, Crystal, for being in the background. To all you guys out there, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Today I want to talk about the human parts of community. A lot of times in community manager sessions, we get wrapped up in platforms and UX and features and that kind of stuff. But really, you know, it's people that are at the base of all this. And so I like to think about it in how can you work with people and how can you get them to participate. I want to just touch on my background because really this talk is based on my own personal experiences in a variety of settings and also my interactions with other community managers. It's not really based on social science research and all that. And so some of the things I say maybe you won't agree with or you'll feel differently, you'll have a different opinion. So I really echo what Allison said. Feel free to jump in with questions or thoughts or other ideas. So my community management background has spanned a variety of different kinds of communities. Earlier on, I worked with NASA, and that was in a K through 12 setting. So really, it was teachers and students that were interacting with NASA people. I worked for IBM for a number of years, and that was really business to business. It was software developers, and they couldn't have been more different than like your fifth grader asking a NASA a question. I switched then to a more frivolous pursuit. You know, I worked for a couple of game companies, and so there again, it was back to consumer, but with a different kind of focus. And currently, I'm at eBay, and that's you know, buyers and sellers in e-commerce. And again, a different set of goals throughout. So that I'm basing it. I think the lessons I'm going to speak to, I think, span all those communities. Let's see. Let me start with the notion that people come for content but stay for relationships. You may fall into a community because you've been researching a certain topic and you find a thread on there. And if you can become interested in a person or other people there and find out a little bit about them and come to depend on the information they're giving, then you're much more likely to stay. And so, how do you encourage relationships? I always think you should address people by name or handle. I tend to do that in email as well. It takes a couple of seconds. But if you've ever been in a conversation with someone and they use your name repeatedly, it's surprising. Not very many people do that. But you get into the mindset that they care about you, that they are thinking about you, not only on what they're talking about. So I really always encourage you to do that. Address people by names. At eBay, we're not allowed to do that. We have to call people by their handles. But make sure you engage people in that simple way. I think it's really important to sign notes with your name. You see a lot of posts that just have the content. There's no to, and you don't know who it's from unless you look into the community identifier. So I always write yours, Mark. I also have come to believe that if you include information about where you are, it's more engaging. In my last job, it was in San Francisco, and California is kind of a magic word to a lot of people around the world. And so, I came to sign all my posts, Mark, San Francisco, California. And even if you're not in let's say, a place with cachet like California, I had a coworker that was in Poland. It doesn't matter. When you sign it like that, people think about you as a person existing in a certain place in space, and they're that much more likely to ask the little side questions that will humanize the relationship. I also think it's really important to show personality and a sense of humor when possible. I mean, there's certainly some communities that are really all about business, and that's where the focus is, and so you have to be careful with using too much of that stuff. But I think even in business settings, if you can just use a little bit of humor or a little bit of stuff that highlights your personality, you're more likely to get people to comment. I had a thread recently at eBay that was pretty contentious, and people were mad about something that was going on, and I joked around a little bit, and somebody said, but at least you have a sense of humor. So I think that's just another way to remind people that you're not just a part of a corporation spewing out the normal, corporate speak, but there's a person behind that. I think it's really important when you choose avatars to use your face. Some people have privacy concerns. They don't want to share a picture of their face. That's fine. I would say choose somebody else's face. I think that, again, it's just a reminder that there's a human being on the other side of that conversation. And when there's a human being on the other side of that conversation, the other people in the community are more likely to be forgiving. Like, let's say your company's put out a product, there are some bugs in it, and people are really mad about the bugs. You know how in communities you're disassociated, people can jump on that and get mean in a hurry. If it's less likely to happen when you're face to face in a meeting, because everybody is reminded that each other are people. So I think that these are all subtle things you do, but I think if you do them consistently, then you're going to engage people a little bit more and get to that human feel. So, in my slides, I've got my picture. I was just interacting with somebody over the weekend and trying to find out about them, and I did some background on them, and everywhere I came across them, they had this particular icon that I'm showing. So, in this case, I was trying to do a deal on Craigslist, and I would have felt warmer about it if I could have seen the person's face. So I encourage you to do that. In your communities, if you can provide robust profiles, it will help people relate. So, there's always the information about how long have you been there, what are your posts, where do you live, But if you can give people a free-form area to just write something interesting about themselves, that's another tool whereby people can come to get to know each other a little bit. It may not be in the mainstream of what you're talking about, but it may filter off into a side conversation. When I was at IBM, we had people that were helping lead the community called discussion facilitators. And so we had a page of information about them. And so not only did we have some words about them, but we had pictures. And I really encouraged all the people to give me a headshot. You always see headshots, but also to give me a picture of something they like to do. So one guy, Frank, played the piano. So there was a headshot of Frank, but then there was a picture of Frank playing the piano. And so I think that just helped. In addition, in the profiles, make sure that there's a way that systematically, if people can find out about their latest posts, their latest badges, and such, so that when you go in to find out about that person, it's more than just the static information that they would have started with. And then finally, to the degree you can, highlight fresh or good profiles. I think it's always the best practice to give attention to the people in your community that are doing a good job. It makes them feel good, and it gets them out there. Typically, people want that. But it also serves as a role model for others. Like when, they see Georgia is highlighted for that. Oh, well, maybe I'll do what George is doing, and that will move me along. I would call this my personal soapbox. Don't refer to customers as users. I know I'm fighting a losing battle in the software industry because everybody is a user. But I think people don't like to hear themselves referred to that way. So maybe it's okay internally in your company, but when you're going outside, I think it's really good to try to avoid that term. In fact, for me, in a recent conversation I had at eBay, I referred to the bunch of people as customers, and somebody remarked, "Oh my God, look at that! eBay's calling us customers," because I don't think they're used to hearing those kinds of words. And then finally, make it personal. It's better to say, "What do you think?" instead of "What does everybody think?" When you use words like "What do you think?", when people read that, it feels personal. Oh, Mark's asking me a question. I better respond. If the wording is "What does everybody think?", lots of times I'm busy. Oh, somebody else will answer that. I don't feel a compulsion to respond. So that's just a little trick that I like to use. Let's see. In terms of communications, be open, honest, and transparent. If you don't know or you can't share information, lots of times you can't. You can't share futures. You might not know what the problem is. I would simply say that. When you give squirrely answers that people don't understand or don't mean much, or you're trying to deny accountability, people know that. So I would just try to be as open and transparent as you can. I mean, you don't need to give away your organization's dirty laundry, right? There's lots of ways to do this kind of stuff that makes you seem a part of the customer community. So if you do this right, then customers think, hey, he's on my side. He's working for this big corporation that won't change the feature that I want changed, but at least he's on my side, and so he's part of it. So I think you build that kind of trust when you operate in that open, honest way. Don't delete negative comments. This comes from my experience when I was at IBM. I was managing a bunch of communities for a bunch of different products and product managers. And these were IBM-hosted communities. and somebody would go, your product stinks. I'd rather use this other product that does it better. And so I would get this note from the product manager, oh, you got to delete that comment. That makes us look bad. Well, as soon as you start deleting comments in that way, people are going to find somewhere else to talk about it. You have to have an honest place for people to talk about things. If they don't do it at your place, they'll do it somewhere else. And so rather than deleting that comment, say, yeah, you're right, and our competitor does that better currently, but it doesn't matter because here's how you can do the same thing with our product. Or we understand that that's a big problem, and we're going to get that in the next version of the software that comes out because we've heard from you. So as soon as you try to make yourself a place for happy talk, where only nice things about your product get said, you'll lose the honest conversation, and people will just stop going there. They can see what's going on. Don't be afraid of words like "I'm sorry" or "I apologize." If you make mistakes, or if your company does, and there's bugs, right? People are writing about those bugs because they want them fixed, but if you can't fix them right away, at least you can let those people feel heard. Showing empathy is a good thing. Start with, oh, I'm really sorry that that's happening. I mean, that's the way customer service people are trained, and in this role, it's really no different. I've had lots of experiences where people have come in angry about something that's not working, and just by showing concern and asking questions and trying to figure out how it's affecting them and promising to bring it to the product team, even before any kind of issue is solved, people can get on your side. So fess up to your mistakes, show empathy, and this goes back to the honest stuff, right? Like if it really is a problem that your company has caused, say so. People know it anyway. And being defensive or try and pretend it's not happening, it isn't going to help the situation. In communications, I mean, I've always got something else to say. And so there's always a temptation to add on the last comment. But for me, it's important to resist that urge sometimes. Let other people have the last word. Sometimes you've already made your points. They have a counterpoint. You don't have to end every conversation. And so I really encourage people to let the customers quote unquote win sometimes, right? I mean, it's just a way to balance things out. Depending on the community, there can be lots of people that are out to get you, and that's certainly true at eBay, where for many people it's a way of life, and they're looking to find the little mistakes that we're making, right? So recognize when you're being baited. Recognize when people are they'll use your name and they'll say specific things about you that are really off topic on what the threat is. So I encourage you not to buy into that sort of stuff. It's not, to the degree that you can get your ego out of it, like you don't have to defend every last little bit on yourself. I think that sticking to the topic and sticking to the facts and not buying into all that other stuff helps you seem like you're above the fray. To some degree, it may discourage those people that are baiting you from continuing, but not always, right? Some people are there just to get a rise out of folks, and so they'll continue to do it. I would say you can ignore it. You don't need to address everything in the community, especially if it's off topic. And then create feedback loops. What I mean by that is let members influence where the community is going. in an early job I had, the community was quite uh, bare bones. There wasn't a lot of stuff going on, and I had ideas on where we needed to go and how we needed to notify other people and all sorts of things, right? But what the community really wanted was they wanted the ability to add attachments into their listings, right? So together we had a conversation about what are the priorities of the community, and I mean the community features, and make sure that your customers have a say in that. They're investing a lot of their energy and time in the community, and so if they have particular pain points, even if maybe it's a side case, it's worth paying attention to and letting them contribute. That's just a way to build ownership. If I come to you and say, I want you to work on this project, and here's the 10 things we're going to do, and let's go do it, it has a much different feeling than saying, I want you to work on this project. I think this is the direction we're going. I kind of have a plan, but what do you think, and how can we incorporate your needs into that? Then it's not only you forcing your thing on them, it's them buying into your thing and contributing to it and evolving it. And then be grateful for constructive criticism. I know that I guess I'm wired to take that in kind of naturally. I think a lot of people aren't, and it's particularly hard when it's out in public and everybody can see it. But to the degree that you can welcome it and say, you're right about that, thank you, I'm going to improve, it's just really an opportunity to improve your stuff going forward. Let's see, when people come into a community, it may be kind of confusing on what's what and where to go. And so really try to make it easy for newcomers that come there. Create a visitor center. It could be called Getting Started. It could be called About Us. Some people are less willing to jump into conversations and ask all those basic questions, right? I mean, the best thing is for them to talk to each other. Like a colleague of mine was just traveling, and he didn't really make any plans. He was staying at bed and breakfast, and he would go to places and he would ask, what's in town and what can I do? Well, so that's a great way to learn about things, but some people aren't so comfortable initiating those kind of conversations, especially if it's stuff they think they should know. So make it easy for them to find information when they first get there. You can have a frequently asked questions, a guided tour. You can talk about membership requirements. Make sure you have help in search, a list of press releases so that they can sort of read up on the history, and maybe even links to notable people. Let's see. Next, I want to talk about volunteer leaders. No community is successful just by the community manager driving everything. Communities are successful when the people in the community rise up and start to take charge. You don't need, for new communities, you don't need a lot of people. You just need a few people to start that conversation with. And so look for volunteer leaders that you can partner with. I would say be careful when you choose those members, right? It's not necessarily, in a technical community, it's not necessarily the people that have the most technical knowledge. In fact, in my experience, often those kinds of people can be off-putting and arrogant, and they'll answer your question, but they'll make you feel small in doing so. Those are not the kinds of people you want as community leaders. You want them contributing their content, but the kinds of people I'm talking about are really embodying the traits that I talked about earlier. You want them to be friendly, you want them to be welcoming. When people have conversations with these leaders, you want them to feel good so that they'll come back. Delineate the responsibilities of these leaders, and I'll talk a little bit more about that kind of stuff on the next slide. Provide training if need be. Earlier on at IBM, I recruited a bunch of people to help facilitate discussions, and nobody in that group, they were all software engineers and coders and configurers. Nobody was really an expert in knowing how to do that. So I sent them a book on community management, and we started a separate group amongst ourselves to talk through issues they were having. So provide training if need be. For some of these volunteer leaders, you can provide perquisites for participating. So it's amazing, and you don't need to do a lot. Like sometimes even just a directed thank you note goes a long way. In the community I'm involved with at eBay, it's really quite new. Not a lot of people are participating, and a guy jumped in and answered somebody else's question. So that was like a big moment for us. And I just took the time to write him a thank you note saying, hey, that was really great. Really appreciate it. And so people like those kind of messages. So send thank you notes. There's other kinds of things you can do. Like at IBM, I would send people T-shirts. And I like to joke that if I would send somebody a $15 T-shirt, I could get $10,000 worth of engineering consulting out of them free on the community. People are doing this for all sorts of reasons, but it's nice to be acknowledged. Lots of times people don't get acknowledged in communities, even from the people whose questions they're answering. You can give them early access to software. In the last game company I was at, it was a race car game company. And so we had a group of leaders, and new cars, we would release new cars all the time. And for people that had stepped up, they would get early versions of that car, and they could play with it before anybody else could. And so that was fun for them, and then they could go out in the community and start talking a little bit about it and create a buzz around what's to come. It also has the advantage that they may help you find some bugs that you wouldn't otherwise find. Depending on the community, one thing you can give your leaders is access to key people. I think this is true more in a business-to-business environment, but it's probably also true in consumer, that if people are really interested in using your product, and you can set up a session with, say, the product management team. So you have people in the community that are off talking to everybody in the community, and then you can build relationships between them and your product management team. You have to be careful because, my experience with product management team is really busy, and you don't want to overload them with a bunch of stuff from the community. But if you can set up a session where 2 or 3 community leaders who have been immersed in the community, so they're not speaking for just themselves, but they're speaking for a much wider group of people, if there's value in them sharing that with the product management team. And then if it's a core product that's important to their careers, they start building relationships to those product managers, and they get insight into what's coming next in the product, and they get to share ideas and drive the direction it's going. That's really a benefit. Also, a private group for discussion. I mentioned that earlier with software engineers that weren't so good at facilitating communities. We would just talk amongst ourselves all the time about the issues that we're having with one another. Another way to reward people for participating in a bigger way is to put a special, give them a distinction online. Put an icon next to their name. So again, when I was at IBM, the people that were discussion facilitators, when they posted in the community, they had like a little green icon, I think was the color, that appeared next to their name. And that meant a lot to people. I know it meant a lot because that system was built on kind of a crummy infrastructure. and it would go down a lot. And so I would start getting these notes from my discussion facilitator saying, you know, it's not that important to me, but I noticed that the icons went down. Can you get them back up? So I think that's an easy win, an easy way to reward people. And then when you are working with volunteer leaders, you know, monitor their continuing participation. If they're getting credit, if they're getting perks, if they're getting an icon next to their name, you don't want them to continue getting that if they've only been contributing for the first 2 months and then they've disappeared. That was my experience, was that people would step up, they'd say, I want to volunteer, I want to help out, and then they get busy with their own lives. And so they disappear. So I would say monitor that and make sure that the people getting those perks are the people that are really contributing. I want to go over different roles within the community. This comes from a great book by Amy Jo Kim called Community Building. I think it's about 15 years old. So the examples are almost laughable. I might have even been before the web, but you know, they talk about read news and it was before social media. But when she talks about the people aspects of online community, I think she's really excellent. So I just want to tick through some of the roles. When people come in, if you have a group of people that just say hello to them, it's meaningful. I joined a meetup group. I joined lots of meetup groups in the San Francisco Bay Area, and usually you just join and then maybe you decide to go to meetup groups or not. But one I joined about a year ago, somebody reached out to me and said, hey, welcome, and this is what we're about. That was really nice to see. So people don't have to have a lot of expertise to be greeters. You can be a host and facilitate core activities like kickoff discussions in the community. Content experts are the people that know the most, and so they're invaluable because you want people to really bring the depth of knowledge there. You can have editors that evaluate content. You can have cops to inform to make sure the rules are adhered to. Sometimes there's teachers that just help people to get to be leaders. Events coordinators would plan events like this or other kinds of things, maybe even offline. You can have people that are there just to answer questions about the system. And then, you know, you can have managers that help evaluate and support the leaders. So people sometimes are looking for things to do in a community, so give them something to do. Give them a variety of things to do. This also comes from Amy Jo Kim's book. I think it's useful to remember that people are at all different parts of the participating in your community. Some people are just visiting and maybe found you by Google, so they're not really part of the community. They may like it, and so then they'll join and become a novice. In between those two, you can have some sort of ritual, a letter, a gift. That's probably not too practical in most cases. There can be like a welcoming event for members, but something that lets them know that they've joined. I mean, typically it's an email they'll get. So then there's novices that are new and are learning the ropes and getting introduced into the community life. When they've been there for a while, they become regulars and they're established and they're really the kind of the core of who's there. And then as you graduate people to be leaders, those are the kinds of the roles we talked about earlier. You have to have some sort of selection for them, maybe some training, and then just a graduation ceremony or something, you know, that lets them know they're part of this. Like I said, we had a regular discussion group for these folks. And then eventually, you know, people graduate to be elders, and they're the ones that the leaders look up to. So there's all different roles. Let's see, in terms of encouraging participation, when you're starting new areas, don't create a board and have people go there and have it be empty. It's really important for there to be some discussions they can look at to engage them. First of all, if people show up and they're empty, a lot of people will just leave. Unless they're really motivated to be there, they go, oh, this place is dead, I'm out of here, right? People are reluctant to go first. This is something that I learned from my first wife. When we would go to weddings, there was this time at a wedding where they go, okay, if it's a buffet, okay, people come up and get your food. folks are always hesitant to be the first one to go. My wife taught me that you should be the first one to go because you get your food, and when you go, then it encourages other people to follow along. And so make sure that when people come to your community, there's examples that they can follow. You know, you can, if you can find some customers to help you, create a list of questions and answers and work together to post them there. If there's not customers that can help you do that, I say do it with a couple of dummy threads. You don't want it to just be yourself talking to yourself, but if you create a couple of accounts, it has the look of what you want your community to be, and then that will encourage more people to talk. More tips: answer in open-ended ways. So even if you are providing the authoritative answer, that if you just say this is the answer, that will close the conversation. If you say, have you tried this? Has this worked? It will encourage more people to join in and participate. Don't be afraid to ask questions of people, and then don't respond immediately. You know, if you're representing the company, give people in the community an opportunity to answer the questions. I'd say the exception to that is if somebody asks a question, a customer responds with an answer that is incorrect or is going to lead other people astray, then you want to correct that information so other people aren't going the wrong way as well. So the last thing I want to talk about is designing products via community. To the degree that you can continue, I've always worked in software, so it's a lot easier to do it in software than it is when there's a physical product shipped. Because once a product's shipped, it's not so easy to make changes anymore. But to the degree that you can use community to get ideas on the products you're putting out there, similar to what I talked about earlier with using your community to help build the community, use the community to help build your product. It gives them more buy-in into the process. You know, the better your product reflects customer desires, the more successful it will be. And some product managers are more open to this than others. But you know, when I was at MindJolt, a game company, it can be really simple. Like, we were coming up on the holidays, a customer said, hey, you should put some decorations on your home page, right? So we did. It didn't take much work at all. We had a graphic designer do it. The whole thing was done in a couple of days. And then that customer felt like, oh man, this company is really listening to me. And everybody else in the community felt that as well. I had an example at IBM. This was in an environment where software was released every year or two. And so when it came out, it was out. But I had a engineering manager who was in the lab. He had about 8 people that were working, 8 coders that were working on a particular part of the product. And this was probably at least 6 or 9 months before it was released. As he was going through ideas, we had a little group that was talking about what his ideas were, giving him feedback. And it wasn't a huge group of people. I'd say it was probably only 15 customers that were participating. But I'm sure that when that product came out, it was that much better because in that interim stage, it wasn't just the manager and his coders and the product manager making decisions, but they were getting input from customers along the way. And then the last example I'll bring up is at my last game company, we were all in English. A customer came up and said, oh, you know, I'm in Brazil, and most people here don't speak English, it's all Portuguese, and can't you do something for us? And so we wound up doing a series of events that this guy led that were in Portuguese. And so it wasn't even work that we were doing. We just took his idea and let him run with it. And so to the degree that you can involve your customers in the process of your product, all the better. So I think that's a good place for me to end the presentation. And then if there's any questions, I'm really happy to kick them around.
All right, that was a great presentation, Mark. I feel like I connected with so many of your examples, from transparency and connecting people to each other and setting realistic expectations, um, all the way up to that analogy of lining up for dinner, which I've never heard that analogy in that context, and it does make so much sense. I think one of the things I really try to do too is feature content that I know our community is very well capable of responding to, even when sometimes I'll have like a quick quip I could put in there, standing back to give people a little more room to speak up. And another tip there is actually
Yeah,
inviting
when I
people. Mm-hmm.
when I was at IBM, I managed about 40 different communities across 40 different products, and I took simple metrics like what percentage of questions were responded to, and what percentage and how long did it take, and the results across those communities were widely different. One of those communities had 100% of the questions responded to with a very low time to response. So I thought, oh, that's good. And then I went and I looked, and there was an IBM person that was just sitting on the community, and whenever a question was asked, that person answered it. And so, it was great for the person asking the question to get a response, but it really wasn't a community, right? And so, if this person went away or got hit by a bus or something, that community was going to be zero. And so I tried to encourage her to just wait, don't answer every question immediately. You can wait a day or two. I mean, many of the things on a community don't need an immediate response, and so those are good times to wait.
Definitely, good point. Yeah, I have a little sticky note linked to all those discussions that should definitely get a response within a few days or a week even, just to check in on those. But giving the community time to step up is really what it's all about. And speaking of the community stepping up, Gary says that he does put most major issues to the community to decide. I think this is from an earlier point in your presentation. And since starting the site in 2009, he has allowed the members to decide super important, pivotal, defining moments of the community as whether it would be public or private. And then all of the groups within the community are created and decided upon by the members.
Yeah, I mean, really, they own the community. It takes a lot of trust, right? Because, I remember doing that sometimes, and you put out a question and you want to go a certain direction, you're waiting for everybody to agree with you, and then they don't. Like they have their own damn ideas, and but that's part of what collaboration is about, is sharing that ownership. So I'm glad that you've been doing that, Gary.
And Ali Armitage asks if you have any insights as to how this would translate to a membership organization instead of a software company, especially in terms of how to encourage members driving events and their experiences offline.
Yeah, so I don't have a lot of personal experience with getting communities to do offline events, but I think as it relates to a membership organization, if anything, the people there are more committed to being there. I mean, they've taken the time to join the group, and the community is I'm assuming is another way to augment their membership, right? And so, one way you get volunteers is you ask them. And so it may be that you take a look at a couple of different people that are particularly helpful in the community or particularly proactive, and then you reach out to them privately and say, I'm really trying to get a few things going, and I'm hoping to get members leading them, and is there any chance you'd be interested? One thing I didn't touch on is that in a community, it's really useful to send private messages to people as well, not all public messages. I think the message I just talked about, we're asking people to do it, is probably something you'd want to do privately. Because if you can put it out publicly, hey, I'm looking for some people that can help me organize this event. It goes back to what I was saying earlier about if you address people by you instead of everybody. If you see that in the community, you might say, yeah, I'm busy. Somebody else is going to do that. But if you go directly to people with an ask, and especially if it's not a huge ask, right? If it's just maybe a couple of hours of work every month or every other month, I think people are far more likely to say yes, especially if you've had any sort of interactions with them before.
So, and then back to the software side, we're really curious here to learn more about ways to get the products team on board. You mentioned um, at one of those companies, someone eagerly responding to questions, but what if the product team is hesitant to get on the forums, either to respond to questions and interact with customers, or even just to view and collect the feedback?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. One is you should bring them into the process early. Start talking to them about how the community might be helpful to them instead of saying, "Oh, I've set up a bunch of stuff. And here's what I want you to do." Like, ask them how it can work. The other, like in my last job, I had a product manager that just really didn't want to have anything to do with customers. He didn't even practically want to hear what they had to say. He had his own ideas, right? So there was no way that he was ever going to be going into the community and responding directly. So in that case, what we did was uh, myself and another colleague, we had a thread which was about product ideation. We would go there and we would call out the ideas, and every other week we set up a meeting with him, and we just talked it through. We didn't do it in email. We didn't require a lot of work from him other than a half hour to sit down with us and say, oh, people were talking about this idea. What do you think? And we weren't, all we were looking to do out of that is it's really hard to make promises for future things in that kind of environment. So all we were looking to get from him is, that's a great idea, we're already going to do it. That's a good idea, maybe we're going to do it, or no way, we're not going to do it for this reason. And so just by having that conversation, like he could say that stuff off the top of his head, so it didn't require a lot of work on his part usually. Then we could take that information and go back to the community. So I think that when you're interacting with those kind of folks, you need to make it as easy as possible. But having said that, I would say that there are still today, it's hard for me to believe, but there's still today product managers that really aren't interested and aren't going to engage and aren't going to play in that way. And so, all you can do is hope that that product manager is going to go away and you'll get a new one. I mean, but until then, is making it as easy on them as possible helps.
We don't have any more questions coming in, it seems, right now, but we do have a little bit more time. I was wondering if you wanted to speak to maybe your work with Sim Raceway and either the conversations or some of the events you did there. You had posted on this on our Cultivate blog, and it's still one of my favorite posts to come through there. I especially like the Desafío America Latina story.
Right. Yeah, I can say a little bit more about that. I mean, uh, the post you're referring to, I think we talked about different kind of special projects you can do in a community, and so I think one we talked about was having a core of leaders there, and so we created a group of champions that were known in the community to be champions, and they got elevated because they were particularly helpful to other people. in the community or they were doing marketing things, and so we recognized them. I alluded to a group at SimRacer we had called testers. And so the testers group were people that would get the software a week before it hit general release. We were having a problem where even though we had a QA group, we were releasing software and it was having issues for lots of people. And so we recruited a group of about 40 or 50 people from different parts of the world with different kinds of systems, different kinds of software that would get our software releases. Once the software came out of QA and was ready to go, it didn't go to the public, but it went to these testers for a week. And so during that time, we would get lots of feedback and sometimes identify issues that they were having. You know, another project that we did, it was a gaming company, and so we had this thing on Fridays called U versus SRW, and so we encouraged our employees to get on the game with our customers and play with them. So in the morning we had races for expert drivers, and so our best drivers would get online with the best drivers from the community for bragging rights. And you know, no surprise, like the customers were better at the game than we were. And so it was fun for them to beat us and haha, we're faster, right? And then in the afternoon was a time where just casual racers, like I'm not a good online driver, so I would participate in that one. And it was just a period of time every Friday. I think it was 2 to 4 or 2 to 5. And no employee was expected to spend 3 hours of their time in the game, but they spent some time, you know, 15, 20 minutes, a half hour, and they were just racing with our customers. And so the way the game worked is when you're in the middle of a race, races lasted 3 minutes or 3 or 4 minutes. Then in between races would be a minute or two break. And so in that minute or two break was just like casual conversation. And so we got to form relationships, and it was a way really to humanize the company to our customers. Like, we're people, we're here, we're racing, we'll talk to you. And you know, the other side benefit is, you know, I think the quote in Silicon Valley is eating your own dog food. You know, a lot of people in our game company never played our game. So it got people in our company to play the game and get a better sense for it. So like if their job was marketing, at least they would have a better sense of what they were marketing. And so there were a lot of people in that case, and it built a nice interaction between the customers and had a lot of other side benefits. And then the last one, I can't say it unless I have the slide in front of me. It was called Latin American Racing. I told the short version of the story at the end of the presentation. Our game was not localized, so people could not play. People that only spoke Portuguese couldn't really play. A customer came to us and said, I want to do something in Portuguese, and that eventually grew to the Portuguese and Spanish, and instead of just Brazil, it was called Latin American Racing. So that word, I can't remember it, meant Latin American Racing in Portuguese. And so really our game was based on events, and we would configure events, people would come and race in them. So what we did was this customer came and said, I want to recruit a lot of people in my country, and he had another Spanish-speaking colleague that was going to recruit people in other countries, and we're all going to come, and every other Saturday we're going to have a race where there's going to be a lot of Spanish speakers and Portuguese speakers, and we'll have a good old time together. And so all it took for us was to configure the event, and when we put information up about the event, we put it up in those 2 languages. And so for me, it was a good way to try to see if a customer-led initiative in this area could be successful. You know, as we talk about in the article, I think it actually wound up not being successful because the customer originally when we went out and we went to the community and we asked them to help design the race, like what car do you want, what track do you want, what format do you want in the race, and we got some input and we put it together that way. But the next step, there was about a 1 or 2 week period where they were going to go off and market it in their own localities to try to bring people in. And I dropped the ball in really managing that process, and it turned out that these customers weren't so good at marketing, and they didn't really generate a buzz. And so, when we wound up doing the event, it did not. We did not have enough people to do it, and so even though it wasn't a success from a bottom line point of view, I still think it was a totally worthwhile experiment to do. Like, customers want to try something, it wasn't hard to try it. Let's let them do it. And if it worked, I had lots of plans. Oh, this is how we'll grow into Italy. This is how we'll grow into Germany, right? We'll just get customers that want to do it, right? So I kind of got ahead of myself and didn't manage the process right in the beginning. But I think the idea could have easily worked had the customers been more skilled at getting the word out and generating a buzz. So if I were to do it again, I would have managed that process a little bit better. But it was fun to give them the opportunity to make what they wanted out of the game, not just what we were producing for them.
Thanks, Mark. I love your stories, and especially that last one. Taking a risk. Sometimes it obviously wasn't a complete failure. It was a really exciting thing for the community to rally around. Whoever was invited and took part in the event, I'm sure that's something that they'll remember for a long time, and good for the brand in the long run.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Mark.
Well, this has been really fun, and I would invite people to reach out to me through my email after the fact if anything comes up for them.
Wonderful. And what is that email address again?
It's msiegel, MSIEGEL @gmail.com.
Beautiful. Thanks so much for your generosity of time and letting people reach out to you directly if they have any more questions about the presentation. Um, and we have been recording today, so we'll be sending out a recording as well as a link to a discussion on our Cultivate blog, so we can bring, any further questions you have about bringing the practice of human-centered community management back to your communities. Let's definitely keep this conversation going. It's a really great one. And, at the end of this webinar, I feel more grounded in the practice. I hope you all do too. And I hope you all have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, Allison. Thanks, Crystal.